Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to be all about to enter the Kaleidoscape. This mode received a content update last week during that final week of April to add an additional 10 floors to the dungeon. Besides that, adventurers can now level up from 80 all the way up to 100, and there are some new bosses to face as well on those final few floors. So I'm pretty excited to check this out. I have not gotten a clear all the way through floor 60 just yet. This is going to be my first attempt in this video, and I want to share my thoughts and impressions on this mode as a whole as we go along. Today I'll be using Nedrick for my clear, and he is kind of a cheat code to this mode, to be fair. His second skill gives him soul charges, which you can see in the bottom left corner near his portrait, and basically those soul charges make it so that only high damage attacks can actually hurt or hinder him. Anything less than 20% of his max HP will be nullified and reduced down to 0 damage, but attacks that hit him for more than 20% of his max HP will instead remove one of those soul charges, and if he loses all 3, he does die for the quest. So our goal here is to avoid taking high amounts of damage in one hit by Nedrick, but thankfully in this Kaleidoscape mode, most of the minor enemies that you face along the way are not able to deal enough damage to actually remove a soul charge. It's really only the boss floors that you have to worry about. So if you are new to this mode and want an easier character to play with, Nedrick is definitely a good choice, or if you're farming, grinding it out, and want somebody who can reliably auto many of the floors, he's definitely worked out well for me so far. If you are new to Kaleidoscape and aren't familiar with this mode, it's basically a roguelike dungeon crawler within Dragalia Lost, separate from your progress in the main game. And in this mode, every time you start a new run, you can either choose to skip some floors and begin in the middle of the dungeon or start from the very beginning, but either way, you are starting fresh. Each run is unique. Along the way, you collect skill tablets like you can see on screen. You collect weapons and worm prints to equip and power up your character. You defeat enemies to earn experience, battle bosses, and get dragons, which you can both transform into and give you passive abilities. So it's a pretty cool mode, not all that old in Dragalia Lost. It's a fairly recent mode still, and it's one that was highly anticipated since the time of the game's release. Now, unfortunately, with the end of service on the horizon, if you really want to enjoy Enter the Kaleidoscape, now is probably your best chance to do so, and with this content updates, there is a lot to keep you coming back and playing the mode too, so we'll talk about some of that toward the end of the video. As far as my strategy here, I am just trying to auto through pretty quickly, switching to manual control to deal with bosses and also to deal with healer enemies, since you do want to try prioritize those. Otherwise, in this situation, Nedrick, who's autoing, might inadvertently just attack all these other spongy enemies and they just get healed up in perpetuity. But that's not something we have to worry about here as we get the clear on that floor, and I think we'll fast forward ahead a little bit until we get to our next boss fight and then talk about that. Anyway, as far as my general thoughts on the Kaleidoscape mode, it's one that I personally was really looking forward to as well, just like much of the community, and I'm glad it was finally added to Dragalia Lost. I think it's a little bit on the long side each run, so I do appreciate the ability to forward or skip ahead to either floor 30 or floor 35 or floor 40 as of this most recent update, depending on your progress in previous runs. That definitely makes it feel like a much more manageable, bite-sized run every single time, and so for me, this Nedrick clear ended up taking about 40 minutes total, having started at floor 41. I feel like that's just the right amount for this type of content, and you are limited to using that skip ahead 3 times per day, so if you really love the mode, probably get a good 3 runs in every day, and not necessarily start from the very beginning. Especially now that there are 60 floors, I can imagine that taking quite a while. You can see here it's our first real challenge with Nedrick, as we do take 2 shots to our soul charge, but fortunately the soul charges recover as long as you can go 15 seconds without getting hit. So we're on floor 45, and if you've played the mode before, you'll know that the boss on floor 45, in this case Volk, is a preview of the boss to come on floor 50. And on floor 50, you'll fight them in their beast form. I thought it was kind of cool to get to do this with Nedrick to take out the Agito, because it just felt like a very complete arc for him. The next set of bosses that we face that are new as of this content update are the Fallen Angels, and then the final boss that we're going to face is actually Bahamut, so it felt like a real good trio of boss fights for Nedrick to take on from a story standpoint too. But anyway, we make pretty quick work of Volk as we're speeding along here too on this floor, and nothing could really stop or impede Nedrick very much, so we're smooth sailing for this part. Of course, besides Volk, you can face some of the other Agito bosses on floor 45, and between floor 45 and 50, you have a chance to prepare to gather the tablets, the weapons, etc. that you want to face that level 50 Agito boss. The Agito boss that you face can either be Kayan, Ciela, Ayahan Zatoha, or Volk, but not Tartarus, and it looks like the new boss additions that have arrived on the subsequent floors, so 55, it can be any of the 5 fallen angels, so Michael, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, or Ramiel. All of them are possibilities. There you saw the Pump King appeared, and that's maybe the one menace or elite type enemy that could pose as a challenge, but he didn't seem to be able to really break any of our soul charges. I say that's the one to really worry about because that's the one menace enemy that will really actively aggro you. The other ones are usually tucked away in hidden corners of the map. They're there for extra EXP, but they won't necessarily chase after you. Now we have a combat mission floor here again, and without actively targeting those healers, this might take a while, so I am chasing down those healers a little bit. One of the things to think about with this mode is just like the variety of preparation or variety of skills that you want to have for the different encounters you'll face. So for example, it's often good to have a high hit count shared skill. It's nice to have a healing shared skill, preferably one with some overdamage like Akashic Repose. Sometimes you need to have Dispel. It all depends on which character you're bringing and what they have innately in their kit, which types of floors will be more problematic and more challenging for you. There are floors where it'll be all healers, and it's really a DPS check to be able to deal with or incapacitate as many of them as you can to slowly whittle them down. Of course, here, we're just dealing with the boss, and we did lose 1 soul charge during that opening blast, but right now Volk is not much of a challenge for us, and it seems like we're going to have plenty of damage to be able to take him out, so I decided to go ahead and go for Bahamut. I'm hoping to time my skill nicely with Break, if I can, and see how much damage that deals to Volk, maybe take him out in one shot, but I don't know, even if we don't quite get there, I think we'll be fine. Some of the adventures that are good in the Kaleidoscape mode are those with permanent forms of progression, because things like that carry over from one map to the next as long as you don't die. When you die, you do lose that type of progress. So I'm talking about things like Dragon's Claws on, let's say, Gala Mim, or even Yuden, or things like Slayer's and Striker's Strength, so think about Naveed or Julieta as characters who might work well with that. Other times, you might want to pick a character that has a special dragon form. That's something that also can work well because if you have a character like that with a unique transformation, it doesn't actually eat up your shapeshifts, since those are limited for most characters based on the number of dragons you collect in the mode. So some of the characters that work well for that are ones like Gala Knot or Kimono Knot. Tiki can also be used to that effect. Sandalphon, some of the Dragon Drive characters can be used like that too. In addition, characters with the sigil or any other kind of super mode are quite strong for this because you can just wait for their sigil to release on one map, and then until they die, they'll have that sigil release. So Basilius especially is extremely good because he has great AoE, he has overdamage for a nice hit count, he can kind of handle all the scenarios that are common in this mode. He can Dispel as well, but the other apostles are quite good too. You could also use like Yukimura. Yukimura is a character that has a special transformation. But anyway, we're now on our first new boss fight, so we didn't see anything too special between floor 51 and 55 here. But now that we're on 55, I thought I'd slow things down again so we could take a look at Fallen Angel Gabrielle. She's the only one I fought here so far, but as I understand it, you can fight any of the 5 Fallen Angels at this point. and it doesn't honestly seem that bad. I think it's because it's the standard difficulty of this battle, but I was just curious to see if she could even get through any of Nedric's soul charges, so I decided to go full auto on this, and she really couldn't. And because it's just the standard difficulty of this fight, you don't necessarily have to worry about all of the minions that are spawned like you would with Yaldabaoth, where letting them survive would tick down Yaldabaoth's tome counter and potentially result in a wipe. That's not really an issue in this fight, and I didn't even see Creeping Corrosion happen. It might have happened like once. Did not see Curse of Nihility happen either, so those seem to be very minimal if present at all. Ultimately, this actually seemed like a slightly easier fight than the Agito was when those were the final bosses back when level 50 or floor 50 was the final floor you could progress to. But having said that, remember there is also meta progression in the Kaleidoscape, so you can permanently power up for future runs. So some of what I'm experiencing might just be the power-ups I've unlocked permanently as well. Anyway, we take care of Fallen Angel Gabrielle there, and then we get another defeat all enemies floor. I'm thinking things are going to be fine. I'm on full auto here. I do get cursed, but what's the big deal? I still can't die, right? And then I start to realize, oh no, one of those enemies was actually strong enough to hit me, and I ran out of soul charges. So this was the point where the run took a turn for the worse, and I was eventually able to get through here, but several floors in a row, I experimented to see what Nedric could actually survive, and it turns out, once you get past floor 55, a lot of these enemies can kill you. One thing that may not be obvious is I lost some of my permanent buffs, so when I started the run, I brought in some max HP buffs. Those are really nice for this mode. You do get to bring in 2 shared skills from your own personal collection into this mode, and those are nice because they provide a permanent benefit, but if you die, you do lose those permanent buffs. So now I'm having to progress through these floors with slightly less max HP, which I guess means that 20% of my max HP damage check on my soul charges is just going to be a little easier for enemies to break through. We progressed through just fine though, and now we have a lot of these floors where we have to defeat all the enemies. These are actually one of my favorite types of floors along with boss floors because I feel like they go by a little quicker, and sometimes the more maze-like floors that you just progress through a long maze, or a long map rather, they just take a little bit longer, and so they're not the most satisfying to me. Personally, one way that my approach to Dragalia Lost Kaleidoscape has changed since it first started is that back in the day, I would really go through and keenly try to defeat every enemy on every map, and now, as you can see with this auto times 2, for me it's more about just getting through in a timely manner. On this last map, to power up for the final boss, I did defeat every enemy I could, got up to level 98, and then we have our final encounter here against Bahamut. So, of course, a fitting enemy for Nedric. Right off the bat, he does take off one of my soul charges, so I'm not familiar with this fight. Definitely want to be careful. Luckily, those meteors did not take off a soul charge. I go for the Akashic Repose there just to get some overdamage to increase my DPS output. In particular, just because I'm not familiar with this fight, I could certainly see this being a challenge for weaker adventurers where you might have to min-max a little bit more, go a little more optimal, try really farm up enemies along the way in order to be successful. With somebody like Nedric, I feel like I'm going to be fine as long as I'm careful, but not knowing the move patterns, you can see I still only have 2 soul charges, and then Bahamut summons a giant meteor, and what I didn't know was going to happen is that several meteors were going to strike in that spot, so I actually got down to 1 soul charge here, and thankfully I knew those small meteors were not going to be able to hurt me, but this big purple looked like it would have, and I'm very surprised that I managed to get through that just fine. I healed there, coincidentally got my soul charge back at the same point, and now that there are 3 orbs and I don't have any skills charged, I decide here's a good time for me to use my Dispel, AoE attack, and hit all 3 of them. So Bahamut's getting kind of low. It feels like I might want to do a Bahamut on Bahamut conclusion or finale here, so I decide to go for it, thinking I'll be able to charge up my skill. These meteors are striking, turning from purple into red attacks. Super cool hit patterns, and the music with this final boss is just awesome. I didn't quite get my skill charged up in time like I wanted to finish off Bahamut with, but I did get the victory. So that was my first run all the way through floor 60. Nedrick looks fittingly cool on that final stage, and of course your reward for clearing the Kaleidoscape is you get special portrait worm prints, which have a variety of different abilities. They're randomized, so it encourages repeat play to try to get the best ones possible for your favorite characters, but of course these are not locked to Nedrick. They're usable on a variety of adventures. Usually if you go all the way through and clear to the end though, most of the abilities on these are going to be specific to shadow adventures, or if you're lucky, shadow and sword adventures with higher percentages on them. So we'll click through some of these so you can sort of see what I mean with these different ability combinations. These are randomized. And the other nice thing that I want to point out here is you actually get about 1,000 purple crystals, or purple amber, for clearing through level 60 of the Kaleidoscape. Back when it was just level 50, you only got about 500 per run, so it's definitely appreciated to get extra of that material, especially because some of the best items in the treasure trade require that purple material, including these new weapon skins that were released with this past content update as well. So I'm certainly planning on unlocking all of those at some point in the future. I may not go as hard on these monthly items just because the game is coming to an end and I don't need to power up that many more characters, but there are still dragons I'd like to unbind, so I decided to prioritize the sunlight stones there. One other thing to share that will keep you coming back to this mode is a lot more of these memories or stories, kind of lore, think about it that way, was added or were added here, and you have to clear with a lot of different adventures to get all of these. 30 different adventures through floor 60 to unlock all of these, so that is a pretty significant ask. That's why you could definitely play this mode for quite some time in the future. Finally, there are endeavors here. There's at least one based on how many you've cleared floor 60 with, how many adventures you've cleared floor 60 with, so you can see it there. That's going to be another source of that purple amber going forward. That is pretty much going to do it for today though, everyone. So thank you as always for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.